Once upon a time, in a small riverside village in Vietnam, there were two close friends named Hai Lua and Ba Du. They lived simple lives as laborers, scraping together enough to survive, with their only valuable possession being a humble banana raft used to ferry people and goods across the river. Day after day, they worked side by side, helping each other through life's hardships. Their bond was so strong that villagers would often say they were like brothers, but no one could have predicted how greed would poison that friendship. One evening, Hai Lua overheard a rumor at the local market. Badu was supposedly hiding a stash of money in a clay jar next to his door. That rumor burrowed into Hai Lua's mind like a worm. Twisting his thoughts, he started to see Badu as someone standing between him and a better life. Dark ideas began to form, each more sinister than the last. In a quiet, hidden part of his heart, Hai Lua conceived a plan to take Badu's life and claim the money for himself. Late one night, when the moon dipped behind the tall palms and the world fell into shadow, Hai Lua crept from his bed and approached Badu's sleeping form. The stillness of the night amplified every small noise, heightening his fear and excitement. As he loomed over Badu, he hesitated, a moment of conscience tugging at him, but the lure of wealth won over. With a sharp breath, he grabbed Badu by the shoulders, pulling him up and dragging him toward the riverbank. Badu awoke in terror, struggling against Hai Lua's iron grip, but Hai Lua's resolve held. With a final forceful push, he sent Badu tumbling into the dark waters. The river, cold and black, swallowed Badu in moments, leaving only ripples and a single haunting gasp. Hai Lua stared, breathless, as the water stilled. Then, with a nervous glance around, he returned to his bed, convinced he had gotten away with his crime. But that was just the beginning. The very next night, strange things began to happen. Hai Lua was jolted awake by the echo of a distant, eerie song drifting from the riverbank. The words were chilling, sung in a slow, haunting voice. Bse Kim Fei, Ta Lang Bra. It seemed to come from the water itself, low and mournful, as though the river was singing Badu's lament. Hai Lua covered his ears, but the sound seemed to seep through his hands, weaving its way into his mind. He shivered, trying to convince himself it was just his guilty conscience. On the second night, he was again awakened by that same melody, but this time, it was accompanied by the sound of footsteps swept, heavy footsteps squelching in the mud outside his door, heart pounding. Hai Lua dared to open the door a crack, peering outside. His blood ran cold. There, standing just beyond the threshold in the moonlight, was Badu. His clothes clung to his body, waterlogged and dripping, his face pale as death, his eyes wide and empty, stared at Hai Lua with a look of accusation and despair. Before Hai Lua could move, Badu began to sing, Bse Kim Fei. Talang Bia, the words were drawn out, each note filled with a haunting sadness, an eerie echo that reverberated in the night air. In terror, Hai Lua slammed the door and pressed himself against it, trying to block out the song and the vision of his friend, but it was useless. He could still hear the mournful melody, closer and louder, as if Badu had somehow entered his home. The following nights only grew worse. Wherever Hai Lua went, he could hear Badu's footsteps, feel his cold gaze watching him from the darkness. On the fifth night, driven to the brink of madness, Hai Lua fled his home, stumbling toward the riverbank, hoping he could escape. He climbed onto their old banana raft, desperate to push off from the shore. But just as he steadied himself, a freezing hand clamped around his ankle. He looked down in horror to see Badu's face emerging from the river, his mouth twisted in a terrible grin, his eyes void of life. The water pulled at Hai Lua, pulling him down into the depths as he struggled and screamed, fighting against an impossible force. He felt the cold seep into his bones as Badu's hands tightened, dragging him into the darkness. And as he sank, the last thing he heard was that same haunting song echoing around him, the song of betrayal and death. Since that night, no one ever saw Hai Lua again. But villagers swear that on quiet nights, the chilling tune of BSC Kim Thang, Salangi BRA can still be heard along the riverbank, blending with the wind and water. A grim reminder of the terrible fate that awaits those who let greed consume their hearts.